Hello everyone, this is Hunter Chris again. I just wanted to share my Stamina Sorcerer build for Update 47. This is a build that's utilizing the Nightblade Assassination skill line for the subclassing. We are only using one subclass for this build. We kept the Daedric Summoning and we kept the Stormcalling skill lines. So for maximum stats, this is with Major Brutality, a Major Salvatory active. Remember that your skills will scale off of the higher of the two main damage stats, whether it's weapon or spell damage. And there it is right there. You want to look at the weapon damage portion. So there's our critical and our weapon damage when it's buffed with just the Major Brutality. We are currently running the Artaeum Takeaway Broth for the food, which will be the main trial food that we will be using for this build. Going further into character sheet, all points into maximum stamina. Our Mundus boon for this build is the Thief. Now, other types of food that we can run for this build, we could also run the Dubious Cameron Throne, which is a cheaper version of the Artaeum Takeaway Broth. Will not provide you as much max stamina or max health as the other one, and you do not get the health recovery either. And then the other food that we also is worth mentioning is the Lava Foot food. This is our main food that we would be using for our parse. Now we'll go ahead and go over item sets for this build. The main item sets that we are going to be running is on the front bar, which is the weapons and jewelry. We will be running the Perfected Noarca. There's what it does right there. Let me get that buff up one more time. Since Sorcerer gets a buff to physical damage, Noarca is going to hit really hard for this build. This is just with Major Brutality active, no other trial buffs. And then on the body pieces, we are going to run the Tideborn, since everything that we do is direct damage. And the beauty of this set is it is a craftable set. And there's what it does. Weapon and spell damage, crit chance, offensive penetration, increase direct damage done to monsters by 12%. Then we will be running a two-piece monster set for this build. There will be no mythics. And the two-piece monster set we will be running is the Maw of the Infernal. That's our main one that we will want to run. Here's what it does with Major Brutality active. Now, the Maw of the Infernal did get a buff the last patch. It now grants weapon and spell damage rather than max magicka. And you summon the Daedroth that does 4,280 flame damage every 2 seconds. But with Daedric Prey active, that damage will get multiplied by an additional 50%. So now you're looking around 6,500 damage rather than 4,200 damage every time that it attacks. So this is the hardest hitting monster set for the Sorcerer build, the Maw of the Infernal. If you are in a group where you have tanks that are complaining that Daedroths are getting in their way and they want you to run something else, then another viable option that we can run is some Selines. This set also received a buff a few patches ago. It used to be a maximum stamina for the one piece, but now it's weapon and spell damage, so it did receive a buff. And then with Major Brutality active for Selines, there's the damage that the bear will do, about 12,000, and you can proc this once every 6 seconds. I am not going to be mentioning Kjelnar's Nightmare for this build because, yes, it does do higher damage, but you can only proc that set once every 10 seconds, which is not really worth running anymore. And then, if you find yourself as an interrupter, you can wear Ansels in place of the Noarca. And then another set that is worth mentioning, if you want to be a purely support role, you can replace your Tideborn with Martial Knowledge. This grants max magicka, 2 weapon and spell damages, and when your stamina is below 50%, your light attacks will cause the enemy to take an additional 8% damage for 5 seconds. This is a really good for a support role if you want to be that StamSorc. Now we'll go ahead and go over the skills. We'll start with the front bar, and the first one is Killer's Blade. Let me get that buff up one more time. So Killer's Blade, this damage will do up to 400% more damage from that 5640 against enemies that are less than 50% health. You don't want to start using this until around 25% health is when you're in true execute range. And you also get a heal if the enemy dies within 2 seconds after being struck, which is really good when there are ads available. This is our main spammable surprise attack. 12,000 damage, and it's guaranteed to crit once every 3 seconds. And every time you strike an enemy from the flank, you set them off balance. So as long as the tank is doing his job, you're going to get an insane amount of off balance uptime. So this is just a super good spammable to have. Next is Daedric Prey. This will make your pets deal more damage. You'll want to keep recasting this. The ability lasts 6 seconds. And then we're going to have our 2 pets here. Twilight Tormentor. This is the Twilight morph that we would be using in the trial environment when you have your healers. But for dungeons or for solo content, I would recommend the other morph, which would be the Twilight Matriarch, which is your healing bird. And then you have your what's known as the Scamp, the Volatile Familiar. This one does dot damage, and this damage again gets further amplified when you have Daedric Prey on it. This will outperform any other dot that the sorcerer offers. Now, if you don't want to run 2 pets, then I would recommend replacing your Scamp and put a banner on instead. And the type of banner that we would be running would be the Shocking Banner, which will increase your direct damage done by additional 6%. The signature script would be Cavalier's Charge. Increase your weapon spell damage by 6 for every 1% bonus movement speed, up to a maximum of 450. You get minor heroism at all times when this banner is up. Now, the trick to running this is you would need to have Celerity also slotted in the Red Tree CP in order for this to make it work. So when you get this and you have Minor Expedition up, which comes from a skill on the back bar, which I will cover later on, and your medium armor bonus, you'll get an additional 360 weapon and spell damage. So it'll be close to the cap. And the difference between running this and running 2 pets on your pars is maybe 3k damage. That's it. Maybe 3k less, and that's pretty much it. I did forget to mention that this sorcerer build does hit almost 145k on the trial dummy as of update 47. So this is one of the highest single target builds to run. And then the main ultimate we'll be using for this build is the Storm Atronach. Let me get that buff up one more time. Storm Atronach will deal 11,000 damage once every 2 seconds for 15 seconds. Each hit is guaranteed to apply the concussion status effect. And here's the thing right here. Nearby allies can activate Storm Atronach, granting them major berserk for 10 seconds. There's the whole reason why we still need to have 1 Sorc in your group, in your trial group, is for this one unique buff that the sorcerer provides, major berserk. Now we'll go ahead and move on to the back bar. Back bar will be Stampede. This can be substituted with a Destruction Staff if in content where the two-handed Stampede is not viable. It would become Wall of Elements, and you'd be running a Maelstrom's Perfected Inferno Staff here instead of the Maelstrom's Perfected Great Sword. But for the highest damage output, Stampede Reason we run this, because for the Maelstrom's Reflected Great Sword, this will increase direct damage done by another 12%, which is really good. This is also guaranteed to be a critical strike, and it deals really good dot damage. Get that buff up one more time. Here's how much dot damage it will do. Next is Hurricane. This really good dot here. Deals 2,137 physical damage every 2 seconds for 20 seconds. And this damage increases, and the size increases the longer it remains active. You gain Major Resolve and Minor Expedition while in this form. So this stays up for, both buffs stay up for 20 seconds. Alright, the next ability we will be running is Merciless Resolve, which is your Spectral Bow proc. I chose this morph over the other one because it does more damage. 22,574 magic damage, and I've seen this crit up to 150k damage before on the trial dummy with all buffs active. So basically, why we did the Nightblade Assassination skill line, there's no more crystal frags. Instead, we will be using the Spectral Bow, which we can activate at will. Almost, as long as you start our fight with maximum stacks active, then this will leave you room to, if you happen to miss a light attack, you'll still have stacks active to activate this. And then our 2 pets, once again, has to be slotted on both bars in order to keep them active. And then we have Power Overload as our ultimate on the back bar. Power Overload is used in situations where we have 500 ultimate, and basically what you would do is you would Power Overload your way all the way down to roughly 180 ultimate, as close to 170 as possible, and then go right into your Storm Atronach for a super ultimate, where the Power Overload will vastly increase the damage of your light attacks, each dealing about 11,000 shock damage. So that pretty much covers all of the skills. Let me go ahead and go over the Blue Tree champion points really quick. The ones that you will want is Exploiter, Master at Arms, Deadly Aim, Raffle Strikes. This is the one that puts out the highest damage output. And then, without further ado, our next portion of the video will be the parse. Hello everyone, it's Hunter Chris again. Before I get into the parse, there is one thing I forgot to mention from my previous clip. That is the type of food type of pots we will be running for this build, and the type of pots will be the essence of weapon power. Reason why we are running this is because we have no other way of getting our major brutality and our major salvatory, so we're going to have to run this through pots. And of course you can restore stamina along with this. Magicka should not be an issue because we're going to be getting that back over time, which we will be running way more stamina skills than mag skills. Now that we've covered everything, now we will get into the parse. Hello everyone, this is Hunter Chris again. We're now getting into the parse portion of the Stamina Sorcerer build for update 47. The first thing that we will want to do is make sure we pre-buff. You're going to get a full 500 ultimate from your ultimate recharging station. Then we are going to pre-buff our 2 pets. This is the only time that you are actually going to hit the pet's special ability, is for pre-buffing purposes only. After that, we're just going to let them do their normal attacks throughout the parse. Then the next thing we're going to do is we are going to pre-buff with our Power Overload form. And you'll notice that Power Overload will actually not be activated until you begin your first light attack. So to go over the rotation really quick, of course, you're going to light attack in between everything you do. But we'll start off with Stampede, Hurricane, Bar Swap, Daedric Prey, Merciless Resolve, 4 times Surprise Attack, reapply Daedric Prey, Merciless Resolve again, 4 times Surprise Attack, Daedric Prey. That was the that's the beginning portion of the parse. Now to get into the parse proper. Now that we already have Daedric Prey active, it's going to be Stampede, Hurricane, Merciless Resolve, Bar Swap, 2 times Surprise Attack, Daedric Prey, Merciless Resolve, 4 times Surprise Attack, Daedric Prey one more time, Merciless Resolve again, 4 times Surprise Attack again, Daedric Prey. Then you're going to rinse and repeat the same rotation until we get into execute phase. Throughout the duration of this parse, when your power overload depletes your ultimate down to around, I'd say around 190, 180-ish, that's when we will go right into our first Storm Atronach. Throughout the duration of the parse, we should have enough ultimate where we will be able to do 3 Storm Atronachs throughout the parse. One, as I mentioned, will be towards the beginning, one will be in the middle of the parse, and then one last Storm Atronach during execute phase. Now, when we do get into execute phase, the thing that we are going to be doing differently is there will be no more Merciless Resolve and no more surprise attacks. We're going to be replacing all this with Killer's Blade, which is our execute. Of course, you're going to want to continue to keep Stampede, Hurricane, and Daedric Prey up. As far as Hurricane, when the target is less than 20%, you will no longer need to reapply that. And then when the target gets down to 10%, you will no longer need to reapply Stampede after that. Then at 5%, there will be no more Daedric Preys at less than 5%. At that point, we'll just be solely focused on Killer's Blade, execute the target until the target dies. And then that's pretty much it. So let's go ahead and roll right on into it. Demonstration.